Okay, let's talk about the last part of containment. The last part of containment, let's talk about his second term in office. His second term in office, George Marshall is no longer the Secretary of State. In fact, usually people don't end up being Secretary of State for two terms. And the guy that was Secretary of State was named Dean Acheson. On your paper it says Deal Acheson. It was Dean Acheson. And Dean Acheson was pretty smooth, and one thing that he was able to organize and put together was something called NATO, and we still have NATO today. The North American Treaty Organization is a collective security agreement. And you can see all the countries in green are part of NATO. Iceland's part of NATO, Canada's part of NATO, the United States is part of NATO, and most of Western Europe is part of NATO. And what NATO is about is collective security. Now, if Norway decides to invade Poland, Norway is on its own. But if any country invades any NATO ally, all of them are invaded. And so the point of doing this is the absolute destruction that would come with you. So if Hungary decides, all right, West Germany, here I come, they invade West Germany, they don't get invaded back by West Germany, they get all of NATO. And the point is collective security. In fact, this became so popular that we started signing other agreements. And you see this on your paper. ANZUS, this is America, Australia, and New Zealand. CETO is Central American Treaty Organization. So now a bunch of countries in Central America and the United States have a pact. You can see if you turn the paper to the next page or two. Anyway, in reaction to this, this was in 1949 when NATO happened. The reaction from the Soviet side is something called the Warsaw Pact. The countries in purple are the Warsaw Pact. You can see a couple over here are not NATO, and a couple countries here are not in the Warsaw Pact, communist countries. But the Warsaw Pact is the same essential agreement that any country invaded will get all of the Warsaw Pact to invade back. So if East Germany is invaded by West Germany, then everyone invades. So now you've really got the sides clamping down. Okay. 1949 was a very, very bad year for the United States in terms of what's happening on the other side. Number one, in fact, it's going to lead to the Red Scare, which we'll talk about when I get back. Number one, the Soviet Union developed an atomic weapon. Many would argue it's because they received secrets from American communist spies. Others would say they were working on it before this. But regardless, by 1949, the Soviet Union had an atomic weapon. And this changed the whole calculus because the Americans were like, you know what? We don't have as many troops as the Soviets, but we got the bomb. They don't. Now they got more troops and they got the bomb. And now we're freaking out. And at the same time, the civil war going on in China ended, and Mao Zedong was able to defeat Chiang Kai-shek. Chiang Kai-shek leaves. I'm going to use the World War II map just so you can see. Right? Chiang Kai-shek is driven off and ends up going to Taiwan, which is where sort of the national... Today, it's like a democratic China. They don't consider... China doesn't obviously recognize it. But now, after Mao Zedong takes over China, and China's a communist country, 1 billion people now became communist. So if you don't think communism was real, think the Soviet Union had the third most number of people in the world. China was 1, India was 2, and India was moving towards communism. So by the end of 1940s, by 1950, almost 2 billion people were under communist rule, right? A couple 100 million here, plus China, plus the Eastern Bloc. So you're like, what, 1.5, 1.6, 1.7 billion people are under communist rule. And it was real. We would, the next year, actually create the hydrogen bomb. The hydrogen bomb was very controversial because it was so much more powerful. It was 1952. It was so much more powerful than the atomic weapon. And this wasn't a bomb that you used to end wars. This was a bomb you used to end people. And Robert Oppenheimer, who was head of the Manhattan Project, who helped designed the atomic bomb was against this. In fact, he was accused of being a communist because he was so much against the hydrogen weapon. During the Red Scare, during McCarthyites, these ultra-Red Scare conservatives argued that it was these ultra-communists who were keeping us from developing more hydrogen bombs. Many of them were just fearful that we were creating a world, which we live in today, where we can actually end civilization. We now have weapons that can end civilizations. And that was the problem with the atomic bomb. So hopefully you guys have got plenty to get done, and I will see you guys on Monday.